Susan Sly, welcome to Roll with the Punches.
Tiffanee, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. I want to acknowledge all of the listeners who tune in to every single show because why? They want to become more resilient. They want to become tougher in life. And I'm just so excited to be here.
Well, what a treat for them today. What a treat for them. I'm excited to have you back, or not have you back. See, I've done it already. We just said that we'd pick up off our last conversation, which wasn't on this podcast, and I'm already doing it. We had a chat on your show recently, and you are amazing. So I thought I'd best wheel you out in front of my audience and show you off a little bit, and hopefully a little bit of you will rub off onto me in that process. That's my thoughts anyway.
I love it. And who knows where this conversation will go. So I just want to pre-warn everyone. There are no, I'm Canadian, but there's a saying, no sacred cows. So there are no sacred cows in this conversation. Who knows what we're going to end up talking about?
I love it. I love it. Well, I've just moved into my new house, Susan, so I'm getting comfortable. I just told you I set up this little makeshift studio because I literally moved in yesterday. I'm surrounded by foam paneling until I get my room set up properly. So I feel like I'm in a little cubby house.
Nice. Yeah. That's cozy.
I mean, it's kind of working though. I might just leave it like this. All right. Okay. Let me tell my listeners just a teeny tiny little bit about you. Best-selling author, internationally acclaimed speaker. You own and manage 2 companies, an Agency 8 and Crimson Phoenix Marketing. Amongst that, you're a mother of 5 and a wife of 1 and an inspiration to many. I can't believe, that's a lot of stuff amidst being a mum of 5. Wow.
Oh, there's one more thing. I'm a co-founder of an artificial intelligence company in the B2B space. So we have enterprise level clients. We have employees all over the world. And so I'm the co-CEO of that company.
Wow. Is that fairly new?
I co-founded that company in late 2018.
Yeah. Wow. God, you are amazing. You are. And you've been all over the television, all over the news, all over the radio, all over everything. So how did you even begin all of this stuff? Where did this all begin?
That's a great question. It's really interesting when we take a look at motivation and where motivation comes from, because there's this question, are you born with motivation and drive, or is it something you can learn? And my answer in studying human behavior for now, I'm almost 50, so studying it for decades, is that the answer is both. Some people are born with motivation because of their environment. So that was me. I was raised by a single father and my very strict Chinese grandmother. We owned a busy restaurant. It was open 7 days a week and it was nonstop. There was the breakfast crowd, the lunch crowd, the dinner crowd. It was just constantly going. And there wasn't a job, Tiffanee, that I didn't do in that restaurant, from folding napkins, making egg rolls, taking people to their seat, all of it. And so I was told what to do and I was expected to do it. So that raised my standard. And we don't get our goals, we get our standard. So because at a young age, my standard was work, produce, result, add value to people's lives. When I became an entrepreneur at age 11, when I started my first business, it was work, add value to people's lives. But because I was intrinsically motivated because of that environment, I didn't need someone at that point telling me what to do. In mentoring entrepreneurs, or whether I've done speaking events with people like Jack Canfield, Tony Robbins, Mark Victor Hansen, dear friend of mine, when I look at people and they come to me and they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s and say, I just can't get myself motivated, my answer is, you probably won't, unless you put yourself in an environment that is going to force you to become motivated. And that's why events are so important, immersion events. That's why retreats, masterminds, all of those things. When you surround yourself by motivated people, like your story, your first boxing match, What if you got in that ring and you were not motivated? Right? But you took your motivation to a higher level because you were immersed in it. So my answer is you can learn it. Some people are born into those environments. That's where I was. So I'm very used to juggling multiple things. I'm a very self-motivated, driven person. And, and I feel, even though I'm almost 50, like I'm just getting started. I'm one of the only women in artificial intelligence. Oftentimes I'm in a boardroom in a tech meeting and I'm the only woman in there. I've had to prove myself over and over and over again. That's why I went back to school. I'm studying at MIT right now because I'm self-motivated to do it, to be the very best I can, which has nothing to do with anyone else, which is my personal standards.
Oh, I love that. I love so many. I want to go down so many different angles and rabbit holes with it. I don't even know where to start. I love that. Do you have siblings?
No.
Yeah. So, you know what resonated? I grew up in my younger years in a 7-day-a-week shop, like a little beach town post office, fast food, grocery shop. And so I spent a lot of my life in there. And then we moved and my parents bought into a motel and restaurant. So I remember hounding for a job before I was old enough to work. And they told me I had to wait till I was 14 to officially work for them. And it was just, I totally resonate with that. And I have a brother, but he was 7 years older. So I often look back and feel very much like an only child. And I definitely had that motivation to, I had this mindset that you've got to go out. Nothing will ever be handed to you. You have to go out and work and get it. So that's fascinating. That fascinates me. One question.
I love what you just said there about nothing will be handed to you, because the truth is people hand things to us all the time, but they aren't necessarily the things that are going to fulfill us or bring us joy or cause us to grow and be better. However, that being said, when you've earned something, when you earn the boxing title, when you turn 14 and you earn that right to work, when you've earned something shifts at a cellular level. Yes. And my father once said, Susan, as long as you have skills, you will never go hungry. So I feel like I'll be in my 90s or maybe, God willing, triple digits. And Tiffanee, I'll still be learning things. Like I'm constantly, right now, I'm trading a lot of crypto. So I'm learning that. I learned options trading. As I said, studying at MIT, I'm just constantly learning because I want to keep my mind sharp. I want to keep growing and keep going. And at events, people say, oh, I want to be like you. And I'm like, I love you. Be the best you can be. But if you try and be like me in a year, I'm not even going to be like me.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun. You know what's fun? There's so fun. So many funny things. But one is, as you're talking, and what are you going back to study, or what are you currently studying?
So I'm doing a advanced certificate for executives at MIT. So it's a 4-year program, and you can study all sorts of things: artificial intelligence for healthcare, machine learning, all sorts of different processes. I mean, so I love it. I'm really geeky, and I did buy a sweatshirt. After I did my first course, I got the sweatshirt. It might be 35 degrees here in Arizona where I live, 35 Celsius, and I'm wearing the sweatshirt. Yeah.
I love it. But I listen to you. I listen to everything you're doing, and it really inspires me. But there's part of in the back of my mind, I'm going, you should study something. You should get into studying stuff too, right? But I'm also doing, like, I'm at capacity with what I'm doing, but I'm always wanting to do more. I'm wanting to learn more. I want to grow more. I want to, as soon as I start to really buy into something, I can't get enough. And it's that always that push-pull balance, like that tension point of part of me is going, you need to just be a little bit patient and relax and chill out a bit more. And the other half's going, no, do more. Like, how do you manage that? Do you get that?
That's a great question. I mean, the whole, and I look at you and you said, well, COVID hit and I'm going to take up podcasting. So you learn, and you're still learning. Even the fact that you just moved to a new house. And one of the first things you did was slap up all of this foam because you knew, because you had studied, right? There is no victory in complacency. With MIT, here's a quick story. So I always, anytime I'm a guest on a show, and I was just on Paul Spear's show, the new P&L, and he was asking me a lot of questions about my dad. And I always give a lot of credit to my dad. His name is Joe. And so when I was, oh gosh, Tiffanee, probably around 10 years old, he gave me the book, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. And so Sun Tzu is studied at Wharton School of Business, Harvard School of Business. It's an ancient Chinese war text, but it's more philosophy than war. And so he said, read this. And I went, oh, okay. And one of the tenets of Sun Tzu is adapt to your terrain. So I have built 3 global sales organizations in 3 separate verticals, one in technology, one in wellness, and one in fitness. And I always taught my salespeople who've generated close to $2 billion US in sales that you've got to adapt to your terrain. And that was one of the things we spoke about. You adapted to your terrain. So to answer a question, is that for me, when my father gave me that book, he also said, oh, Susan, someday you can go to MIT. Now that's all well and good. I left home at 15 years old. I skipped 2 grades in high school. I started uni when I was just turning 16, and I failed calculus. And so Tiffanee, my father, an engineer, I had to call him and say, Dad, I failed calculus. I was mortified. And there was this long pause on the phone. And he said, Susan, I failed first year calculus too. And so after that was over, I said, Daddy, I'm never going to end up going to MIT. I mean, how do you get into MIT if you fail calculus? So here I am co-founding this AI company in 2018. And yes, I can sell. Yes, I can raise money. We raised 7.1 million in seed funding. I can do all of those things. But what did I know about artificial intelligence? So I thought, just like you last year, I thought, I've got to learn. Where do you go? You go to MIT. That's where you go. So I was on LinkedIn and this ad pops up for an MIT course in artificial intelligence. It's a certificate. I register for this and I call my dad and I said, Dad, I finally got into MIT. So adapting to my terrain, here I was now a co-founder of an AI company, brought in to raise money, brought in to build a sales team, brought in to build a business, but didn't know a lot about AI. So I had to adapt to my terrain. And the advice I want to give to the listeners, and you listen to Tiffanee's show, is you don't just adapt to your terrain slowly. You jump in with 2 bloody feet and you adapt to your terrain quickly. The businesses and the people that adapted to their terrain when the pandemic hit, they're the ones who are either doing new things and crushing it, or they're making a fortune because they adapted themselves and they adapted their businesses.
So true. So true. What do you... I can't remember the question I was just going to ask because I had 2 in my head. You've got me like just so on edge with all of these questions. Question number 1. I feel like that motivation, that drive and motivation for me, and the appreciation. So when you were talking earlier about when you were a child and nothing gets handed to you on a platter, and I feel really strongly about that as a positive. I think, but it's sometimes I catch myself out also feeling frustrated by it, and almost a little bit like I'm in a position now where I look at the people that I rub shoulders with, I look at what I'm in and to the level I'm in it, and all of my peers in this space at this level, they have enormous profiles, they're academics, they have people that are in their business going out and doing the marketing and doing the sales and getting the guests, and they have all of these different cogs to the business, and there's part of me that is so proud that I am every cog in the business, and that hard work got me here. Hard work, nothing but hard work, because I wasn't in this space. But then there's another part of me that's I catch it out all the time, and I don't like this part, but I catch it out where I feel frustrated and annoyed and a bit pissed off. I'm like, you guys don't have to work so hard. Why do I have to work so hard for this? Do you know what I mean?
It's a question. I think it's a question as women we ask ourselves often, right? The first thing I want to say is I've been there myself, and it's easy to get to that place where it's like, why is this so hard? Or why does it have to be so hard? The three things I want to say: number one, you can't train something you don't understand yourself. So in the beginning, in any business, now in my agency, I have many people that work for me, but I attended the digital marketing conferences. I learned how to build funnels. I learned how to do those things. And it taught me how to recruit the best people and then train them and let them take off and teach me. So number two is everyone is our teacher. So once we start to live into this notion that everyone is our teacher, we learn things faster. And then the things that used to daunt us are the things that we now make look easy. And the third thing, many years ago, after I had lost everything, I was homeless when I was at 24 years old, I was a millionaire, I was on television, I was on radio, I was, I hung out with celebrities, and I lost everything because my ego, that stands for edging God out, was bigger than my bank account. And so it looked good on paper. I drove a Mercedes. I had a Louis Vuitton handbags, television, walk into a restaurant. They give you, free bottle of wine, dinner, all of it. And I was so full of myself because I thought, Tiffanee, that because it looked like I had everything, I thought I had everything, but I actually had nothing. And in January of 2000, so many things happened, but there were some key things that happened. Number one, I was diagnosed with progressive multiple sclerosis at the age of 27, and I was a professional Ironman distance triathlete. So I was sponsored. I raced my last race I did, Ironman Malaysia. I had a fractured pelvis, MS. I still finished 8th in the pro division of the elite women. Oh, nice. And my friend Susan from Australia, we ended up, our feet were all swollen and blistered, and we ended up going to McDonald's in our training kits, which, for triathlon back then were super tiny, like beach volleyball outfits for women. And we walk in Malaysia, it's Malaysia. We walk in and have Big Macs. It was funny. It was the last time I ever ate a Big Mac, 2001. And so that happened. 3 days later, I caught my then husband sort of in some extracurricular activities. 16 weeks later, we end up losing our business. We're shut down for failure to pay taxes because I had buried my head in the sand. And I walk in, it's a Good Friday. I go to teach a spinning class, and there's a huge padlock on the door. It's like, you haven't paid your taxes. All my students are there. I'm mortified. And the third thing that happened, so losing a business, going bankrupt, I became a single mom. I lost everything. But the third thing that happened was such a huge blessing, because it was one of my Team Canada teammates who said to me, and if you take nothing away from my interview, like, who is this woman? She's insane. He said to me, Susan, you define yourself by what you've accomplished, what you do. The media. He said, if you lost everything tomorrow and you were all alone, naked in the woods, and you had nothing and you had no one, who would you be? And I didn't know, but I couldn't just let that question go, Tiffanee. And I went out on my bike and I rode about 60 kilometers, and I kept going, who am I? Who am I? And I started to think about this concept of dharma. What is it that we're passionate about? What is it we're supposed to be doing? And the word teacher came back to me. That was literally a week before the padlock on the door. And if he hadn't asked me the question, and I didn't have that when I actually did lose everything, the thing I didn't lose was my sense of self and who I was. And 3 years later, I built a business that went on to make millions and millions of dollars. I did things for different reasons at that point, but it was this sense of saying, I no longer can do those things for the wrong reasons. And it's the same thing for you. You didn't get in the boxing ring. Yes, you're a prover. We're both provers, but you didn't get in the boxing ring to prove anything to anyone else the day of the fight. It was all about proving it to yourself. The podcast, it was the same thing. I'm going to prove it to myself. And 80% of podcasters haven't produced a show in the last 90 days. But here you and I are. We pump out new content every single week. I have new videos on YouTube. I don't care if 80 people watch them. They're there because someday that channel is going to have millions of followers and they'll go back and watch my old school stuff. I know this, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It was only maybe a week ago where I sat back and I actually had this conversation kind of with myself, and I said it to a couple of people. I said, and it's ridiculous that it was over a year down the track before this popped into my mind, but I finally ruminated and said, I've produced 180 something episodes. The moment that I decided 3 episodes a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I never ever failed to produce an episode on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday. And then when I added a Sunday, I never failed to upload that. When I decided I would have a business Facebook and Instagram, I never failed to make it look good, keep it well branded like I committed to myself, and have a theme, something I've never been able to do before. I never failed to do these things. And when you think about it, right now, there's no repercussions to me going, a bit busy. It doesn't matter if my episode goes up, Friday or Saturday. It doesn't matter. But I just went, that's commendable. Like, I spend a full-time hours producing this thing, and I never tell myself that that's commendable. I'm like, if someone else did that and I was sitting with them, I would be praising them. Why aren't I praising me? Why don't we praise ourselves? It's such an important component, and I think it's an ever-present battle for people like yourself and me who are striving and pushing and working and thriving. And I love what I do, and I guess because it didn't feel so much like work, how hard I was working wasn't in my awareness.
Well, and it's the standard changes, right? So going back to training for boxing, I trained many years ago with the Canadian female champion. I would just work out with her. I remember the first workout, like, I was fit. I was a pro triathlete, and I thought, I'm dying, literally dying, right? So thinking about our standards, as I said, we don't get our goals, we get our standards. Yeah. So when someone you and I both have a fitness background, when someone hasn't been exercising maybe ever in their life, and they start walking 20 minutes a day, they're exhausted. But then eventually that becomes easier. Then it's like, now I want to do 30 minutes. Oh, now I want to do an hour. Now I want to run a 5K. Now I want to run a 10K. Now I want to run a marathon. That's the natural progression as humans. When there was a book that was written by Anderson Cooper, the CNN journalist, and he was talking about sharks and how sharks only live because they keep on moving, that the water going across their gills oxygenates them. That's how they survive. And it was in that moment, Tiffanee, that I thought, wow, I'm like the shark. If I don't keep on moving, I will die. And I think the same thing is for you, is that it's the moving through things, the producing of the episodes, but that's your new baseline, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay to say, you know what, I'm not going to congratulate myself because it's a baseline. But you know what, I'll congratulate myself at episode 200, because now I've outperformed most of the female podcasters because they don't get to 200 episodes. And then I get to 300. Then I'm going to celebrate. When I get to 1,000, right, then I'm going to, throw a party. But you've got to keep on moving, because women like us, we're like the sharks. If we don't move, we die.
100%. What do you think your superpower is? Tell me the one thing to you that stands out, that across everything you've done, if it wasn't for that one thing, things would be very different.
Well, the first one I would say is my faith, right? I'm very connected in my faith with God. From the tangible piece that I'll say to everyone, it's the following. So Jim Rohn was a business philosopher, and he was the mentor to Tony Robbins. I'll tell a quick story. So many, many decades ago, Jim Rohn is doing speaking, and he takes out a hotel room, a venue in Long Beach, California, and he puts ads in papers, he does flyers, and 18 people show up. 18. Front row, one side is an 18-year-old kid. Front row, the other side is a 19-year-old kid. And Jim used to have a philosophy that said, I'm going to only focus on the people who are in front of me, right? Like right now, the listeners that are listening, if you want to DM me or whatever, or come through Tiffanee and let me know if this is resonating for you, I'm only here for you. That's it. I'm not concerned about who's not listening. I'm only here for you, concerned about that. So the 18-year-old kid is Tony Robbins. The 19-year-old kid is Mark Hughes, who went on to found a company called Herbalife. He's now passed. Multi-billionaire. But the reason I mention this is Jim Rohn, as he progressed in his speaking career, I shared the stage with him 3 times, including the last time he spoke live. So I'm going to answer your question with the following tips. Number 1, Jim said, only 10% of people ever finish a book or finish a course. And I would say, or finish a podcast, but only 10% of people ever get to $1 million, right?
Yeah,
Bottom line.
wow.
Number 1. Number 2, he said, never, ever start your day without ending your day. Never start your year without ending your year. So my superpower that's made me millions and millions of dollars is that for the last, 16 years, I write out my day in advance the night before. And if something doesn't feel right, if it's out of alignment, if it isn't a positive ROI, by positive ROI, it means I'm either making more money, I'm having greater upliftment in my life because I'm adding value to someone's life, or I'm taking care of me, I move it out of the schedule. And so that's my superpower. And I do not miss a day. I do it every single day except Saturday night. I don't do Sunday because I call it sold out Sunday. I don't work on Sundays, just a personal thing. So every single day I do this the night before. And then I write out for my 3 companies, the numbers 1 through 5 under each of the companies. And I do 5 income producing activities every day in each one of the companies.
Oh, I really, really love that. Some strong strategies. I love that. Tell me, how do you keep your ego in check? How do you know that that's not going to happen again? Because, the tricky thing is when you're in the middle of something, you never know you never have the self-awareness when you're in the middle of something. You get that, in hindsight thing, you come out of it and go, oh, right. So how do you check in on that now?
Oh, tall poppy syndrome, right? Yeah. So working in the industry I work in and not having a PhD and not, having a computer science degree, I get my ego really put back in place on a daily basis. Today, even, oh my gosh, I was in a meeting and our company is going to do a rollout with a client in 1,000 locations. And we were waiting to get the IP addresses back from the company. And so I'm in the technical meeting and there, everyone's talking about these different things. And they're like, does anyone have anything else? And I spoke up and I'm like, hey guys, we need those ISPs. And then the co-founder of the company is the co-CEO is like, Susie, you mean IPs? And I'm like, I know, and I knew it was an IP address we needed, but for some reason I said ISPs. And it's that I really don't have an ego because I feel like because I've lost it all once and my kids keep me humble, God keeps me humble. And every single day I'm showing up and I have to laugh at myself, Tiffanee, like IPs, ISPs, GPUs, CPUs, like there's just so much, right? And I feel grateful, but I used to take myself way too seriously. And now I really don't.
Yeah, I love it. How come, why do you think only 10% of people reach $1 million? Is there one big thing that's catching a lot of people out? Is there one thing they're either missing or doing wrong?
That's a great question. So the statistic in America is that 7% of businesses make it to $1 million. 7%.
Wow.
Okay. And in the world, 7% of people achieve their New Year's resolution. So it's even less than 10%, really, right?
Yeah.
Those are Jim's words. I would say, that's 7%. So what is it the 93% do that causes them not to achieve what the 7% do? And the biggest study on millionaires in the United States was done on 10 million millionaires, and less than 2% of them had inherited the money. Right? Less than 2%. No one had won the lottery. The top profession for millionaire status was teacher, that it was engineer, and these are just everyday people. So what sets them apart is really the discipline, and to do those things day in, day out, like produce 3 shows a week, and then it's 4 shows, and I'm going to learn how to do it. And I'm doing it on myself, and I'm getting to 200 episodes when hardly anyone does that, right? And I'm doing the things in the dark and the quiet that are not getting attention, but eventually they'll get someone's attention. I'll give you another example. Lily Singh, the YouTuber. So because I'm from Toronto, Lily's from Toronto, I'll give shouts out to Lily. So Lily was doing on YouTube 4 unique pieces of content a week on 2 channels. So 2 shows on 2 channels every week. For 4 years, no one knew her name.
Yeah.
Before she got, I think it's a $30 or $40 million deal with whoever it was, CBS or whatever, she was the highest paid YouTuber, woman YouTuber, and she was making over $12 million a year. And everyone knew who Lily Singh was. But for 4 years, she does all these videos, right? And that's my point. Millionaires will keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, even when it hurts, when other people aren't noticing, because they know there's a part of them that knows that if I just keep on going, I make 1 more sales call, I do 1 more follow-up, I put out 1 more podcast, I do 1 more video, I do 1 more post, at some point someone's going to notice. So I just want to say a really quick story. So I've been so privileged, going back to humility, to meet some of the most incredible thought leaders, some of whom are no longer here. And one of them was Wayne Dyer. So Dr. Wayne Dyer was an incredible thought leader for his time. And when Wayne wrote his first book, The Erroneous Zones, in the 70s, no one wanted to read this book. So he said, I'm going to start calling radio shows, and I'm going to do the shows at like 2 a.m. because all these people, the talk radio shows, they needed guests. No one wanted to come. And so he put his books, and back in those days, there was no call-in. You had to go to the studio. He put several boxes of his books in his station wagon, Tiffanee, and he just called radio stations. Hey, I'm in New York, whatever. 2 a.m. one morning, Johnny Carson's producer was up and couldn't sleep. He heard Wayne. Wayne got on Johnny Carson, and then Wayne became one of the best-selling authors of all times and helped Louise Hay build Hay House. Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield, they have a very similar story about Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait. I swear, I'm telling you right now, this is going to be my story one day. This is definitely going to be my story.
And most people don't want to live the story. They don't want to live all of the chapters that lead up to that great, I don't say ending, that great beginning. They don't want to do that. And that's why, going back to podcasts, that's why 80% of podcasters haven't produced a new episode in the last 90 days. Yeah. David Meltzer's team just reached out to me. They said, we want to start sending you guests. And I said, why? Because, my main gig is obviously building a company that our goal is to take it to a multi-billion-dollar AI company. So I do my show as a service piece, but I'm putting out new content a few times a week, right? And they said, because very few podcasters actually put out new content every single week.
Yeah, wow. That's so crazy. There are a lot of people reach out to me, wanting advice and information on podcasts now, which is really cool, and I love helping them. But it was interesting. There was a recent one, and they asked me a little bit of advice, and I shared, some platforms, equipment, this and that, and it was the kind of sign-off comment that told me they weren't they would never produce more than one episode, and that was that they said, I'll do one episode and see how I like it or see how it feels or something like that. And I was like, what I want to know is what is it accolades that people like? People want the masses and the accolades? Because I never wanted that when I started. I never dared dreamed that I would have the audience that I have. I wanted the opportunity to improve my communication skills, and I wanted to leverage this amazing opportunity I had to network with higher level people. Now, those two things happened in an instant, and then next minute I was getting an email saying you're number 8 on the charts in Australia, and I was, my numbers were going up, but I didn't know the stats. I didn't know there were charts, and I didn't know what listener numbers were. So I didn't realize that the job I was doing was quite outstanding. But I can see how when we look for the accolades straight away, when we look for, if I'm told straight away that I'm really good at this, and if money starts streaming in the door, then I'll keep doing it. But that was, I didn't plan to have even entertain the idea of sponsors for 2 years. I thought 18 months, 2 years down the track, if I'm still doing it, then I'll be in a position to get sponsors. I had sponsors from month number 2 until today. And I think that for me, the lesson is just that, is what we're focusing on. Mm-hmm. And I think if I had focused on the latter, I think if we had focused on, I'm going to make some money out of this, which would have been a really, understandable thing in the middle of a pandemic where I wasn't making any money. It would be really understandable to go, how can I make money? But I didn't go, how can I make money? I went, how can I spend my time? Yeah. So that was a lesson for me. And I think that's changed a lot about, there's been a lot of healthy changes in my mind about that, about how I focus. What do I focus on? And what can I lose and what can't I lose? In such an unstable environment, we can lose money in a heartbeat. We can lose I'm still in the fitness industry as well. So that a lot of that's out of my control. There's a lot that's out of my control, but I can never lose my audience. I've already got my gear. All I need is an internet. I can live in a cardboard box with a few phone panels, of course, and I'll never lose that. So I can keep putting the work in because I know I can never lose that. That's always going to make traction. Whereas I think those types of businesses where we're just trying to make money or build a clientele, and then the government keeps locking us down, that can play, a big part in your emotions and your consistency.
Oh, definitely. And that Jay Shetty wrote something that I read recently, which was, he said that people who sustain success are in love with the process versus people who have fleeting success are only in love with the result. And so that it sums up beautifully what you said is, it wasn't like, I'm going to podcast so I can get sponsors. And I know, I know people who make money as influencers. And it's interesting what motivates them. Oh, I just got a brand collab, or someone just sent me this or whatever. And I never hear from the people who are motivated by that, oh my gosh, one of my followers just said, I prevented them from killing themselves, right? Like, what we focus on, we find, and what we focus on expands. And so if we're doing something, whether it's putting out a show or putting out a video or we're, closing a sale or whatever, it's why are we doing that? And there are low conscious and there are high conscious reasons to do it. So Dr. David Hawkins, who was huge in Australia, he's also passed. Why is it so many of these amazing people are passed? But Dr. David Hawkins was a medical doctor. He wrote the book Power versus Force, and he was the forefather of muscle testing. And so he trained Jack Canfield, all these different guys in muscle testing. And Dr. Hawkins, I was trained by him. So he had the scale of consciousness, and people can Google it. And at the low end of the scale are things like hatred, greed, revenge, all of those things. And the highest level are things like love and joy. And there's a line that people cross, and that line is called courage. At the line of courage, people start to go to the higher conscious reasons why they want to do things, to challenge myself, which is what you did, to find valuable ways to use my time, and then to find ways to add value to other people, and then to find ways to add value to other people, fill my time and expand my mind, and then to finally get to a place where I'm doing something I love. To go through all of those emotions is really hard. But for the people who say, I just want to do what I love and get paid well for it, you can, but are you willing to do it for years and years and years while no one's noticing, is the question.
Yeah, so true. You coach a lot of people, don't you?
I don't do private coaching because it's not my all time has an ROI. So if you want to make $1 million a year, your time is worth $500 an hour. My time is worth more than that. I don't have a private practice. I do free group coaching once a month. I run an annual retreat for women in Sedona for women who want to make 7 and then 8 figures and build businesses. And it's an intimate event. But one of the first questions I ask women is, what's your exit strategy? Mm-hmm. And my friend who's training at the next event, she was an attorney. She had a massive practice. And then she got all the way to the top. She was the #1 attorney in America, Tiffany. And then she was like, there's something more for me. She and her husband moved across the country, and there she was in California. It's 2018. And she's like, what am I going to do with my life? And she hears Russell Brunson on a podcast, and he's talking about funnels and things. She's like, what is a funnel? She ends up in his funnel, getting his free book with the shipping and starting to read about it. And in 2019, she started her podcast. She started her YouTube channel. In 2020, she had her first 7-figure year. Now she's on track for a multiple 7-figure year. And it goes back to this whole aspect of consistency. Her YouTube channel has, right now it's like closing in on 150,000 active subscribers, engagers. Her list is well over 100,000 people. And she's proof positive, just like you are, in a short period of time with the right intentionality, the right focus. We're not even talking about all of your time, how long it takes you to record a show, edit a show. I know it's like, let's say for each show you're putting out, let's say it's about 4 hours, right? So there's 12 hours to put out 3 shows, but what are you doing with the rest of your week? Right? You're promoting the show here and there. You're reaching out to people. You're looking for guests. Anyone, in my opinion, can build a 7-figure business part-time, even if they're working full-time. And I know, because I've done it.
I love that. I keep forgetting my questions because I'm so bored into what you're saying. Oh, what was it? Hang on, it's coming to me. I'll edit this out.
Or don't. It'd be funny.
Because I felt like it was a good question. Oh, that's it. What is it important? How important is it? And is it important for everybody to have a rock solid vision, plan? Or is a general intent and flexibility on how that eventuates okay?
That's a great question. There's this saying in sales, right, that your why has to make you cry. And people get stuck on this. They think, oh, if I don't have this, there's a French saying that I love, raison d'être. If I don't have this reason for being, and it's so huge, I'm never going to accomplish anything in my life. And I totally disagree. My oldest daughter, Maggie, I rescued her from a shelter in Malawi, Africa. And she had been brutally attacked. We'll keep this episode PG, so we don't get the E rating. Brutally attacked by her uncle. Both her parents had died of AIDS, and she was wandering the streets of Lilongwe naked and pregnant. And in at this particular time in Malawi, there's no value of human life, or very little. So fortunately, these foreigners decided to take her to a women's shelter, and there she is. And they said, well, we don't really want to take you in, but you're pregnant, we will. And so she's, washing latrine. She's literally sleeping on a cinder bed, a cinder block, and she ended up losing the baby, but they let her stay at the shelter. And so I met her. She through a friend of mine, Jones, who was a social worker, and I've gone to Malawi many times. He said, you have to meet this girl. There's just something about her. And I'll use another French expression because the French ones just sound so good. Je ne sais quoi. It just means like there's a little something about her. And so I take her for lunch and I said to her, what do you want to do with your life? And she looked at me, Tiffanee, and she said, I'm going to be an accountant. And I said, how are you going to do that? You're walking back and forth to school with like no shoes. You're living in a shelter. You have no money. And she said, I don't know. I just am. And it was that not knowing the how, but she just knew the what. And it wasn't, and I said, why do you want to be an accountant? She's like, I just do. And so I ended up, I couldn't take her out of the country, but I became her legal guardian. I sent her to Joyce Banda School for Girls. She graduated university. She's now expecting her second baby. So I'm trying to, she's like, Mama, will you name the baby? Because I named her first baby Honor. So that my point to your question is sometimes that nudging of the what. You started podcasting, you're like, I'm going to start a podcast. It wasn't, I'm going to be sponsored. I'm going to be top 10. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be this. It was like, I'm going to do this. And you, from what I gather, didn't even know exactly why. And it wasn't this like huge passion. It was like when you decided that you were going to box. It was going through the process of the training that helped you connect to the why. And what I want to say to everyone is just start. I knew in my career, having accomplished many things, but there was always something missing. And I wanted to grow a large company and take it to an exit. I wanted to do the whole startup thing, Silicon Valley. And if someone said, why, Tiffanee, I would have just said, because I do. It's like a challenge. I want to do it. And then as we've gone for the last 2.5 years, and I've learned so much about myself. I have been in the United States, only 2.5% of women-led pitches to venture capitalists are funded. 2.5 flipping percent. I've had VCs tell me, people like you have to compensate for your gender. You need to tone it down. I've had like people criticizing me. I've walked in a room and they're like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But my why has developed the longer I've gone on. And the thought of not doing it, the thought of not seeing it through, the thought of not taking this all the way to the top, the thought of my investors not getting the biggest ROI that I can get them. Sometimes that's what keeps me going. It's the thought of not versus the thought of. So the why is going to evolve. It's going to get deeper the longer you go. You're going to, as we spoke about earlier, you don't get your goals, you get your standards. As you keep going along, your standards keep going and going and going. You set the bar higher and higher and higher. And that's how it goes. All you have to know, listening in the show right now, and you can on Instagram, just go at Susan Sly, tell me, what is something you want? You want to be a best-selling author. You want to be the new morning show host in Australia. You want whatever it is, just decide the what and just jump in, figure out the how along the way, ask people for help, dig into your network. And guess what? Eventually one day you're going to wake up and go, I think I'm getting this. And it might be a couple weeks. It might be a year. It might be 4 years, like Lily's saying.
I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. I've got a friend of mine, Chris. He runs a business. He's hired me to speak to his business before. After 2 rounds of boxing, I met him in the boxing gym. We did 2 rounds. He stopped. He said, can you please come and speak to my team? So we really clicked, but he's a really evolved creative thinker. And he said to me from the start, I need you to, he goes, I do this with all of my employees and a lot of them really struggle. I make them use their imagination and creativity, and I send them home with these tasks. And he goes, I want you to tell me a 5-year plan, and I want it to be so big. I want it to be so big that it scares you. He goes, you're going to have to go home. And I really struggled with it. And he's been back on my back very recently. And I think where I struggle with it is I've found this intrinsic motivation and this passion that wasn't developed around a plan. And so what I learned from that for me was, I remember Craig Harper saying on, I think the second time he ever had me on a podcast, way at the start of my little venture, one of his final questions, so where's Tiffanee, if all goes well for the next 5 years, what's going to be happening? And I was like, I'm not gonna give an answer because there's nothing jumping out at me. And if I say something, like, I think sometimes do we lock our eyes on something just because we feel like we have to, and then we're closed off from the opportunities that present? I want that thing to feel the way that what I'm doing now feels. And as this develops, I know that this is going to, that I can evolve this into something that means a lot to me. And I'm not going to just say, oh, it's helping these people, it's doing that. I know that it'll be helping people in need in a passionate way that I connect with, but I'm not making stuff up yet. So I've got the answer because I'm not a very good fibber. I'm not good at, I'm not good at, I'm not good at lying. So if I were to say, I'm going to do this, it wouldn't feel congruent.
Well, thinking about that, I love that you brought that up. And I wouldn't be on your show if you were a liar anyway. Think about the Olympics, right? The people who've trained for years, and does God have a sense of humor, right? So that you thought you were training for years and you thought you were going to compete in Tokyo in 2020. And then you competed, and there were signs that said Tokyo 2020, but it was actually 2021. You were a year older. You had to train in your parents' backyard pool or whatever you had to do. So it didn't quite look like you thought it would. Yes. And the thing I would counsel to everyone is that it's not always going to look like you think it will, but sometimes those detours have a purpose that is taking you to a higher purpose.
Yes.
And I think about, as an example, I think about my son. My son, AJ, is a tremendous human being. He's 19 years old. When he was born, he didn't walk until he was 3. He didn't speak until he was 3. He was in the Montessori little classroom, and he would just sit in the reading nook and hug people. And he would look at the picture books. And they called me in one day and they said, well, he can't count by tens and he can't count by hundreds, and the other kids can do it. And I said, but what is he good at? And they said, well, he has the ability to make people feel really good. When a little child falls, he's the first to hug them. When, a teacher's having an off day, he seems to know. And I said, okay, all right. So AJ, all through school, Tiffanee was told, you're not ever going to be competent enough to be able to attend community college, let alone uni. You will never be coordinated enough to play team sports. You, grade 7 or grade 6, you should be on medication. Okay, so it was just all these things he was told. So as a result, my son didn't set any goals for himself. But I kept on saying, AJ, remember, you are remarkable at making people feel good. So eventually we moved from Canada to America because I was fed up with the resources. We end up in America. I put him in a special school where all of the children have learning differences. There are Asperger's syndrome, the different things going on. And he's suddenly playing soccer, and he's playing American flag football, and he joins the cross country team, and he goes from failing school to getting straight A's. And he's still the person that makes everyone feel good. The reason I mention this story is because we're going to set goals and we're going to think it's going to be a certain way. But life is going to throw us, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is going to throw us some detours that we perceive as challenges to getting to the goal. All AJ eventually wanted to do was to have friends and get good grades and not freak out about homework. But because of his challenges he had, here's the story. I ended up coaching his cross country team. He ended up as one of the top 20 runners in the state of Arizona. He's currently at university and he has a 3.84 GPA, which out of 4, and he's on the president's list.
Wow.
So everyone listening, my gosh, yes, you're going to set goals. Sometimes you're going to be derailed. People are going to tell you can't do something. Screw them. I failed calculus, but here I am studying at MIT. I was the kid who was overweight in school. When I was 10 years old, I weighed 70 kilos. I was made fun of, I was bullied, I was chased home, I was all those things. I became a professional athlete. I was homeless in 2000, and then I became a multimillionaire. It doesn't matter what anyone's telling you. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be perfect. And what I would say to you, Tiffanee, is it doesn't have to be a clear 5-year goal. And I'm going to have a billion followers or whatever the case is. A lot of that stuff is rubbish. We hear about it, but those people don't achieve it. You just have to have a little notion of a what. And that's what the movie The Secret was about. When Rhonda Byrne did that movie, and I knew several of the people who were in that movie, when she did it, it was just thinking about the what and just feeling moderately good about it, whether it was a feather, whether it was $100 bill, whether it was a cup of coffee. And that's what I would say. Whatever your 5-year is, just something with a what, it has to feel a little good, and then just start walking in that direction. And eventually you're going to get there. And you might even get there faster than 5 years. Just like you with your podcast, your 2-year goal, you slayed it, you got there so much faster. And you just knew the what and had a slightly good feeling about it.
Yeah. I'm all about the feels. I've always said when there's an intention, when I have an intention and I set my kind of mindset towards something, but I take action, something always happens, and it can be eerily timed. Something always happens, but it rarely happens the way that I expect. So I always have had that kind of, I guess, in line with The Secret, that mindset of your intention matters. You have to have an intention, but you have to take action. But that action is never something will happen, and I'll be like, oh, that definitely happened because I took action, but it was so separate to the action itself. So weird, but I love it. I don't know, it's a bit woo-woo, but I love it. Works for me.
It's okay. There's a lot of joy in the woo-woo. There's no joy in I'm just waking up and I'm scrolling Instagram and I'm judging myself against other people and I'm just watching the news and, oh my gosh, I have to live in my hovel because the pandemic is still here. There's always going to be something. There is always going to be something, but who are you going to be in that something? How are you going to adapt to your terrain?
Yeah. Last question. IQ versus EQ. What do you value more in people?
Oh, well, definitely I value EQ. I love smart people as long as they don't have an ego. Someone's smart, but they have a heart of a teacher. And I'm so geeky. I just love smart people. And I have a friend, her name is also Susan. And Susan is doing a startup. And get this, she's 60. Okay, she looks 34. She doesn't do any stuff to herself. She just looks 34. She's 60 years old. She helped work on the first Siri.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Susan's doing this startup and I'm having brunch with her in LA a few weeks ago. And I said, Susan, walk me through your startup. Honestly, Tiffanee, it was like she was speaking a different language, but I fortunately have learned to translate high tech into everyday understanding for people. She's like, we're doing the metaverse and we're doing this and it's going to be on the blockchain and we're doing this. And then I translate and I'm like, so this is what you're going to do. And she's like, I need you to translate this for people. I'm like, and And I mention this because she's so smart, but her EQ, as high as her IQ is, she's probably a member of Mensa, her EQ is even higher.
I love that.
And I always say we can teach anyone skills, but we can't give them heart.
Yes. I love it. Amazing. Susan, how can my listeners follow you, find you, hear you, see you?
Well, I would love to hear, hopefully, my goal is always to provide value wherever I go. So I'd love to hear what is something that you're taking away from this episode. So you can just, tag me on Instagram. My website is www.susansly.com.
Thank you so much for joining me again today. You're a weapon. I've taken heaps out of the chat, so I'm sure that my listeners have too. And yeah, we'll keep in touch and I'll reach out to you again soon.